thank you to everybody who is joining us in the chat right now in our session. This is Building Your Community Tech Stack. So in this session, we have 3 expert panelists who are going to be sharing their tips on selecting a community tech stack, running community-led events and discussions and forums, and then also how measuring the impact of community is why it's important, how to do it, and just kind of sharing some overall advice. I would like to remind you all that above the chat, where you're all very active right now, which is lovely to see, there's a little Q&A section. You can click the Q&A and then ask your questions. If you don't know what question you want to ask, still go check it out, because you can actually upvote questions that you want us to answer. So then the questions will be answered in the order of popularity at the end of our conversation. So I'll start by introducing our 3 very expert panelists here today, starting with Hawk. First name Sarah, but don't tell anybody. She is an expert in the UX of community platforms and is currently VP of Community at Discourse. Originally a software developer, she has spent the last decade in community roles and works remotely from her home in New Zealand, where it's 7:30 in the morning tomorrow. When away from the screen, Hawk is a gym instructor, a wine drinker, and a mother of twins. Next, we have Fede. Fede is a community coordinator at Codecademy, a leader in online education and learning to code. He grew up in southern Spain, enjoying the bliss of coastal Mediterranean life. He studied aerospace engineering in college because flying things are cool. He developed a passion for code, and now he helps others discover the world of coding and changing their lives forever by learning sought-after skills. Last but certainly not least, John. As the community practice lead, John has established Grazitti Interactive as thought leader in community management and social media. Grazitti Interactive is a digital innovation leader helping companies with marketing automation, sales optimization, and cloud innovation services. In 2020, John hosted Community Refocus 2020 Virtual Summit with over 1,000 registrations and hosts the Community Talks podcast series. Whew. These 3 folks together have done a lot of things. As for me, I'm Beth McIntyre, head of community here at Bevy CMX. I oversee the CMX community, which is the world's largest and most passionate network of community professionals. I oversee the engagement strategy and structure of all of our community spaces. And I, like many people in this session right now, I'm so excited to learn more about community tech stacks, the conversation around software, the conversation around operations. And so let's dive right in. I would love for each of you to kind of share in your own words what exactly it is that you do in your role. Like, what's the most important part of your typical day? Hawk, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So my title is a bit of a misnomer, really, in the sense that we call the half of the company that doesn't directly write, excuse me, the source code, the community team, and that's the half of the company that I run. So VP of Community, I don't really manage a community. I manage a large team of community professionals. And so, yeah, my role's split pretty equally between the operations, people management, and enterprise negotiations, to be honest. So, yeah, there's 20 people on my team. They all work from their homes around the world. I think we're at 8 countries for the community team at the moment, which is a
between different companies, and what processes that you can repeat and are repeatable, and what technology works better together than others. After 47 of them, you kind of see it kind of work a little bit better than some of the other things. So it's been a fun ride here at Grazitti.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear some of that experience today. We're going to try to still fit it into our 45 minutes though. Okay. Fede?
Yeah, my typical day, I feel like I split my time between two things. I have to sell community to the broader company on one side, and so inwardly, and then I also have to take care of the company, of the community directly. So I moderate part of our communities. I'm like one of the moderators. The other ones come from the community, and I just try to focus both on the health of the platform, the health of the events that we do, and also, like I said, the health of that communication that goes between what Codecademy as a company does and what we do as a community. Because since we are an online learning platform, you can imagine how our community of learners is sort of like when you go to college or school, where your learners are your users, are your community, and it's kind of like drives everything that you do. So there's a lot that we do behind the scenes to make sure that all the teams at Codecademy are aligned with what the community needs.
Awesome. I feel like that's going to be a really good perspective as we start talking about how you fit your tech stack into the rest of the company. But first, actually, Hawk, I wanted to ask you, because when we talk about tech stacks, when we talk about community management in general, there's so many different skills and things that people who are in this position are supposed to do or expected to do. And so as someone who leads a team of 20 people, I forget the number, in 8 countries.
Something like that.
What characteristics do you look for in a community manager? It can be hard because nobody's walking around with like a degree in community management.
Yeah.
So what are the characteristics you look for?
Yeah, really good question. It's something I'm quite passionate about. And I think there's probably two parts to it. One specifically related to the tech conversation. And that's something that we've been experimenting with quite a lot. Do you hire for technical skills and product knowledge, which in our case is reasonably technical, or do you hire for those more peripheral skills that make a great community manager? And I've tried both approaches in the past with differing levels of success. But I think at the end of the day, you need a little bit of both. But for me, I think at the end of the day, you can learn to become technical and you can learn a product. But it's really, really difficult for some people to learn the empathetic way of thinking that it kind of requires to do this job. So in that light, I guess the primary things that I look for are strong written communication skills. That goes without saying for us. Patience, which is ironic because I'm not known for mine. Empathy, attention to detail, and then secondly, that subject matter expertise. But I think if I think about what has gotten me here today where I am, it would be tenacity. It'd be a sense of humor. It'd be having the courage to laugh at mistakes and to learn from them, I suppose, and having the courage to pivot when something doesn't go wrong. Mostly, though, I think acceptance that things don't always go the way you expect them to, and that you don't always know the answers. So it's about having the guts to ask the questions. So those things, but I could go on all day. I'm a bit passionate about this. I guess one takeaway would be that the thing that is standing in everybody's way that I've ever met in this business is imposter syndrome. So just remember that absolutely nobody knows what's going on inside your head except you. So just own it, be yourself, be strong, be gutsy.
You know, that's such good advice. Imposter syndrome is absolutely real. And I think that we could all take great comfort in exactly that maybe nobody knows what they're doing. Some are just better at faking it than others.
Yeah, exactly. And owning that. There's nothing wrong with owning that either.
Totally. Well, and so, I mean, coming with imposter syndrome, I'm like going to try to segue here. John, you kind of define community management as a service. So I feel like you're truly owning this idea of like community management as a service. So tell us about this field. What does this mean?
Yeah, no, after working in communities 15 years at some very large organizations, I started to realize that there was this delineation between these soft skills, these community, these interactions, the empathy, the tone, the way you communicate with people versus the guy that's building the site or developing it and coding it and or running it, adminning it. And we saw that through my career, there was this delineation between a platform team and like the community team manager, right? Where there was a group of people that, you know, really were good at tech, and there's people really good at hosting events and rallying people and being empathetic to their needs and rallying the troops internally. And so us at Grazitti, we've really tried to say, okay, we can be that tech side, and we can allow your community manager to work on what they're good at, right? So where now you can offshore, my company is all located in India. So we can offshore a lot of the stuff where you need a banner or a promo or something like that. That's something your community manager, I could do it. You know, I could go get Photoshop and I can put it out there and it would probably look okay. Yeah, even though I went to school for graphic design, but I haven't done it in 15 years versus a designer who does it day in and day out. They can turn it around in like half hour and have it back to you, where I would spend like 2 days probably trying to do it. And so I realized that when we were at Oracle, that we were wasting this time by trying to do this community manager. So we had a tech team and had 6 community managers that just focused on the product. They were that product expert and they were that talker, and then they would just submit in these tickets. So we've really tried to come up with a process here at Grazitti to help people, community managers, focus on the community and let like our tech team kind of handle on the community tech side. Not to say that these guys don't know community. There's a nuance, I think. Can't just have like a web developer come and build your community. I don't see that ever working out. There's a nuance to building a community, even from the tech side.
It's true. And I think a lot of times community professionals are put in their position because of those community management skills, like the tenacity and the humor that Sarah or that Hawk was talking about. And it's hard though, because you do often have to wear those 2 hats. Sometimes you are like Fede and you wear both the, you know, like internal buy-in hat, and then you also wear the external moderation and engagement hat. And so Fede, what does your tech stack look like? How do you use each piece in each platform that you're using?
I mean, we rotate through a lot of things. I think we've tried a few and tried to figure out what works best with everybody. The constants seems to be on the corporate side or the company side. We use Notion and Slack a lot for keeping our thoughts together and to keep everybody informed on what we're doing. Notion has been great for us. Has the way you build pages and build these wikis where we can just direct everybody there. And also, I think there's 2 more parts to it. So that's the internal side. And then more outwardly facing, we have all tools for communicating and all tools for hosting the actual communities. Our tech stack, it's split between how we connect with people in Facebook, Discord, Discourse, or emails, and also where these communities are being hosted. Like I said, like Discourse also for hosting, or Discord and other places. So I feel like splitting in 3 avenues and trying to keep it all organized helps us a lot for when we have people that are not familiar with community to say, this is where you go to get this information, this is where you go to communicate, this is where you go to find the community. And you'll be surprised how often having this kind of like, it seems minimal and very basic, but having that level of organization, how often it helps other team members at Codecademy find the community. We'll have curriculum developers and we have web developers that will say, hey, we're trying to run a beta program, or we're trying to see how people are liking this new course or this new part of the catalog. And they come to us and I can quickly say, this is where you can go find the community. Ask them yourself. Go ask, post a question, see what they say. And it really feels very natural and organic. And it also gets everybody very pumped up because they get to talk to the users, and it's kind of like a very surreal experience for them when they're always behind the computer building the things, and then they get to talk to people that are using the things that they make. So the tech stack, like I said, just keeping it organized and keeping it in communications, hosting, and internal seems to be working really well for us.
I love that you touch on that, like getting the internal community of your employees excited about getting engaged in the external community, because oftentimes it can feel really it can feel like a challenge to get the rest of your organization involved in community. They sort of understand why the community exists. You know, you're always cheerleading about it every month and saying like, how amazing are we? But it really helps for your actual organization to get involved themselves and see the magic in action. And you do that, like, I mean, obviously the rest of your organization is super keen about your community, right, Fede?
Yeah, no, I send messages. I bother people. Like, now that we're half capacity at the office and I can ambush, so to speak, people, I would just tell them, I'd say, hey, this user complained about this. Are you going to do something about it? Or, hey, these 15, 20 users are talking about this part of our catalog. Are we going to do something? Are you all going to update that? And I can pester people because I got, you know, the people that matter, the users, I got them behind me and I got that information, so I can like easily connect them to the source and tell them, yeah, you should be paying attention to this. And it helps a lot. I think that would be kind of like a theme umbrella of all the tech stack that we use is there needs to be a communication of data between all of them, because that's what at the end of the day is going to convince someone that they should be investing more in community, or that they should give you more of their time or more resources. So I think that's kind of current of any tech stack that you do, is that you need to make sure that you're collecting data and you're using that data in a useful manner, because that gets the buy-in that at the end of the day improves everything.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I mean, there's obviously so many different kinds of programs and stuff that community managers can choose to implement into their community to drive that data and drive that engagement. And so, Hawk, as someone who's worked with forums for a very long time, where do you feel like forums specifically fit into a community tech stack? And how can people actually use Discourse to make the most of forums?
Yeah, for sure. I think that I have to ask you a question first. And I mean, I think it depends on the nature of the community. Like, what is the nature of the community? What business objectives is it trying to support? Because no one size fits all. And that goes for forums, and that goes for everything else as well. So, for instance, if you're running a support community, then forums are generally right at the heart of things, right? Whether that's a Zendesk style forum, or whether that's more of a tech support self-serve forum. And I guess shorter term, you're deflecting tickets, longer term, you're building up a knowledge base. So support right at the heart. If your community is supporting some kind of learning, Codecademy, any of the kind of LMI type things, then you might have a chat, an ephemeral chat sitting alongside it as well. You might have a knowledge base sitting alongside it as well. That's part of a separate section. Ephemeral discussion platforms kind of help with people that are in the middle of a panic exam style. But then you've got your forums where you can have your wider discussions. If your community is a community of practice or interest, then that just becomes a really broad discussion place where people kind of find their people. This kind of environment, forums can kind of come along later. You have your event on Bevy or on your live event platform, and then people do the connecting afterwards, or people stay connected between events. So I don't think forums have a specific role in community. I think they have a specific role in each type of community. I do think they serve an important role in just about every community. I know that there are, there's all the old arguments about Facebook or about Slack or about all of those sorts of things. Sure, everyone knows their audience and everyone makes the right choices for their audience. But personally, from a longevity of information kind of perspective, then forums is the way to go. Second part of your question, how do people make the most of Discourse? That's easy, talk to us. And I'd say that the same goes for all vendors. It's not just Discourse. I have a team of people that are there specifically to help people make the most of their forum platform. And it breaks my heart when I hear people talk about the things that they can't do with their platforms when they've never even asked. Like, Discourse is open source. If something doesn't exist, then someone will make it. We work to a rule of 3. If 3 customers want something, then we build it. And if you don't talk to us, then you're doing a disservice to the 2 people that already have. So yeah, I would say that in every single situation, talk to your vendor. I think Discourse is a bit like Photoshop or Excel, where everyone, or sort of like the graphic design stuff that John talked about, everybody can do it, but most people only do about 1% of it. You know, most people can hack a photo, most people can make a spreadsheet, but the depth of functionality that sits below that 1%, why would the average person learn that? Why would they be using the kinds of functionality that a different type of community needs? Why would a different type of community be using the same functionality that he does? You know, unless you have a conversation, unless you say, I really wish you could tell me how to do this, then yeah, you're not just doing yourself a disservice, of course, but the rest of your community. So always talk to your vendor. And if your vendor isn't amenable to talking back, then you're with the wrong vendor.
That's good advice. And I want to just highlight the piece that you said about the forums probably having a place everywhere, and how they can go so well with your events and things, because we talk about, and there isn't really a one size fits all, but I would say that, you know, all communities would probably benefit from both the asynchronous, like a forum where people are chatting not in real time, and the synchronous, which is like the events programs. You know, we're having great conversations now. People are learning live together, asking questions. I see someone just put a question in. So that's great. And then after this, we can take it to that asynchronous.
That's
format.
right. And lots of people feel much more comfortable learning in different environments. Lots of people feel much more comfortable having this kind of it's not one-on-one, three-on-one, you know, this kind of conversation. And lots of people find that they can commit the time to a specific event, whereas sometimes the paradox of choice in a forum when there's all of this stuff and you don't know where to, you know. So absolutely, you've got to appeal to all of the different pieces of your audience. With your different technologies.
And so because we often span different kinds of technologies, you know, we have events platforms, we've got forums, we've got all sorts of things going on. John, I feel like you have the experience in this that you could speak to, like, what are some of your best practices around community tech integrations and starting that kind of journey?
Yeah, so that's, you know, a big part, right? Where we have all these other major systems. And I can tell you right now, the largest companies out there spend significant amount of money just thinking about what those tools are and how they're going to connect. And it's really about the data, right? So at these larger enterprise organizations, showing, like you said, case deflection, or showing retention rates, or sales attribution. And the only way to do that is being able to select systems. Your community platforms needs to connect to your CRM. It needs to be able to connect to your LMS. It needs to connect to your website. It needs to be able to connect to, say, an enterprise or federated search program. It needs to be able to have, you know, video integrations with your, you know, content management system for video, right? If you're doing that, or your documentation, like your knowledge-based integrations, right? Where we're seeing what I've built at my previous company is where we tried to create this self-service destination point, right? To really try to drive value for the customers, and learn from multiple my larger companies that the fewer amount of sites and less amount of clicks, the happier the customer was. So that's where we really tried to be able to do these integrations. So say, yeah, I have a knowledge base. It's over in Salesforce. Salesforce knowledge is awesome, Madcap, whatever it may be, but they have to go over there and search over there. So the first way to bridging gap is like search, right? Making sure you have like an enterprise or federated type of search where you can search across multiple platforms. It's like one of our most simplest or basic integration. I think that will help out with these multiple domains. But then you look at, you know, how can I bring the content over into the platform? And that's where you're thinking of your next level integrations, to where now you have two-way sync, where they're in your platform, they can read the knowledge base article right there within there. They can watch the LMS training video because you have a training section in your community. I always say, like, your fully developed community has all these things, right? You have education, you have marketing, you have sales, you have support, you have engineering or product or feedback going in there. You have user groups and events. And when you start to get all those things kind of working, goes back to what Federico said about the internal, right? Like, I used to run an internal community and an external community at another enterprise company. And it was like, okay, the closer I got to 100% adoption of the internal community, the better my external community was working, because now all these people's 15,000 employees are using it, right? They're like they have their ideas now. They're like, hey, we saw someone do this on the internal. I want to do that with my customer. And I was like, well, sure, we could do that. That sounds like a great idea. And so, just using your platform, and it's all about the data these days and connecting it. So the one thing, if I was saying invest in, is what kind of data management BI tool. If that was something that I was starting out with, I'd be like, okay, how can I get like a Tableau, or how can I use the Google Studio version of it and try to get those reports, because you need that to get your funding to keep your community going. You might get your budget the first 3 years or something, but if you're talking, you want your community 12, 13, what is it? BMC celebrated 20 years, right? So of having a community around. So if you want to have the longevity, of really enduring time and layoffs and reorgs and all these things, analytics and the numbers is the way to solve that.
Very true. And John, I wonder then if you have any advice to kind of follow up on that, because the data is so important. But oftentimes the story that you tell is more important. Like the data you get, okay, great, we increased this by this percent, or we decreased this by this percent. But like, any advice about how do you actually tell the story to your exec team?
Yeah, you really got to keep in mind your metrics with what your core company goals are. I've learned this time and time in my enterprise days, that unless I was driving to there's usually like some core pillar goals that are set at the beginning of the year for your company, what they're going to do that year. And unless I can tie my numbers directly to one of those goals, my VP or my CEO did not care. It's like, how did that drive to the bottom line to the company? Did I increase sales? Did I increase revenue? Did I increase one company was brand awareness. That was my main goal, was to increase brand awareness. That means more conversation, SEO value, more membership, social media increase, and that's brand impact. But so I had to so look at your overall corporate goals and try to tie lines to them. And you can do that. Then when you submit your numbers, people will be like, wow, you really impacted $2 million in sales. Impact means they were on your community, and that company participated in the community, and then they bought in that same time period, and then participating that quarter, revenue was generated by that company. You can attribute sales to community participation loosely, right? And then and show that, and then something like that, you're like, wow, you are making. You do it with social media now, sales attribution through social media, even in the B2B context. I think a couple storage companies did some really good studies on that stuff. So, yeah.
Well, and I don't know if I'm the first to say this. I agree that imposter syndrome is a big challenge among community professionals, but I'm also going to say, and this is on record, that another thing that brings us all together is the fact that sometimes, because our job is so emotional and social, like we're engaging people, we're building connections, it can sometimes feel a bit, I don't know if wrong is the right word, but to then turn around and say how much that relationship is worth to the company. And so I think that is kind of one of the core pieces of that struggle, is how do you build connections organically and, genuinely, and then turn around and tell someone else how much that connection is worth. And Fede, you kind of talked about that because you do wear both hats, and proving to executives and then also moderating and engaging with the community. So I guess to kind of go back to the engagement side, and we spoke about what you do between events. So how are you and the team at Codecademy keeping the conversation going in between your community events?
Yeah, to follow up with what you were saying about wearing both hats, we have the luck that the person that we report to understands that anyone can teach online, and our community is what is going to differentiate us from everybody else. And having somebody above us that is kind of knows that it matters, it lessens our burden considerably. So that the fact that we don't have to fight every week to prove ourselves, and that they know that there is an inherent, there's an intrinsic value in having a healthy community, that helps a lot. To your question about keeping the conversation going with the community, since we are a learning platform, the conversation, it's always revolving about learning. And the way that we keep our conversation going usually is following up with learners at different levels of their coursework and their catalog, and trying to ask questions like, hey, everybody, has anyone reach out to this part of the coursework? Are you working on this project? Trying to bring groups of people together, or the learners that maybe they're all struggling with the same thing. If it's funny that we are all in the same community, but there is not a lot of visibility of how everybody else is doing. And so between events, part of our work, it's always focusing that awareness that you're not alone in this path. Everybody's struggling with this. It's not that you're dumb or anything like this. The course is hard and everybody struggles at some point. So we spend a lot of considerable amount of time trying to engage our community directly and trying to make them aware that what they're doing and the struggles they go with is what the entire community is going to. So just expanding that visibility, if you may, of everybody being aware of how everybody else in the community is doing, kind of like the overall health of the community. That's usually what we spend the most time on. We also do a lot of planning with the community for upcoming events. So we also engage the community saying, hey, you had fun last week with this. What else do you want to see? And we bring people back and get the conversations going on what else they think that will be useful for them or what they would like to see in our platforms next. So we do kind of a bit of both, supporting everybody, telling everybody that it's okay to feel the way they do. Everybody's together on this, building that boat, and also just trying to engage them in the process so they feel that it's not that the community is to them, but it's with them, kind of that mentality. That we are, you're not just being delivered a community, but you are part of it and you can build it and you can be a stronger part of it too.
You have to, right? I think all good community managers, you have to have that, even going back to my days, I used to be the sim master and run the Sims community for a bit. And, they wouldn't accept me at first. So this was a diehard company, forum that was, these people love, breathe, eat Sims. And I'm this new guy that joined, and I'm the Sim master. That was my title. And they're like, who are you? You better show us, what you're talking about, before they would even. I had 80 volunteer moderators around the world that I had to wrangle. It was 4,000 posts a day. So it's not like you can read all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So but I had that mentality. Okay, I'm the customer. I'm the voice of the customer to the company. And I carried that from the gaming industry over into tech companies as well, where, we realized that one job, there was no real feedback on we did ideation, right? Everybody does ideation. So you do ideation, but we do the ideation, and then the product team was didn't do anything with it. So then they're getting pissed at us. So then we had to really go to an executive conversation, is that we need to be a customer first and really be thinking about our customer and a customer feedback. If we're looking at our CSAT scores and they're low. And so we came up with a hypothesis, say, okay, if we listen to our ideation and actually complete the ideas, the feedback, and put them into the product, that our CSAT score was go up. And so we tried this for 2 quarters and 2 releases, and guess what? The CSAT score went up. Shocking,
that
right?
happens in every forum. That's not just you. It happens in every forums. I feel like the moderators at any forum, they feel very, attached to what they've been working on, especially their long-term contributors. Our case was actually a special situation in which the forums have existed pre-community team at Codecademy. So when Codecademy has a company decided that they wanted to have community managers and they want to have an actual team dedicated for the community specifically, we already had communities online that has fan pages sort of thing. Yeah. So we had the forums on Discourse, and they were being run by this group of awesome 50 moderators, 50 moderators, and they were doing it great. They were doing a great job. And then here we come, right, and say, hey, we're Codecademy, you have our brand, and all of a sudden we're interested in what you're doing. And now we want to do all these things. So we're going to run events, so we're going to do Q&A, so we're going to do and you can't just stomp on what they've been doing for so long. First of all, because you need them. They for any healthy community, you want those moderators to stick around. They know what they're doing. And second of all, because they felt like we're the outsiders. Hey, we've been running this for years without you, and now all of a sudden you are interested in this? Okay, well, you're going to have to prove yourself first. You're going to have to earn our trust. So we know that you're not
try fixing this, and this. Right? They give you a list of things to fix.
Is that corporate greed of oh yeah, you guys just want to hear more users. This is where you are. You don't really care what people are saying. You don't care about the forums. You just care about your bottom line. That's sort of back and forth. Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I would argue as well that the most important tool, or like the best way to run your community, is just to ask them what they want and then to actively listen to what they want. Because you know, and that's where the imposter syndrome comes from. It's like, oh, how am I going to know what my community wants? How am I going to know the features they want from our product? Well, you don't need to guess, because they're right there. And believe me, when you ask them, they're going to tell you exactly what they want.
I think the important piece there too, though, to remember is that you need to manage expectations, because I've seen things go terribly wrong where people have gone, hey guys, what do you want? And so they've got, oh, we want all of this. And they're like, well, sorry, we don't have the money, or sorry, we don't have the time. So it's really important to say, tell us what you want, and we're listening, but that doesn't mean you're going to get all of it straight away, or that doesn't mean, and just because you're not, doesn't mean we don't think they're good ideas. But this, ultimately, it is a business, right? It is a business, whether we like it or not, and you've got to find what that balance looks like.
Ask for a very specific thing. My ideation tip for the day is, if you're going to be running ideation, don't ask like, give me your feedback on your product. You're just setting yourself up for disaster and failure.
Yeah.
But ask something very specific, like, give me your feedback on the drop down. Right? Or give me your feedback on this one feature, and run that, and then close it, and then fix it, or get the top thing and then implement it, and then open your ideation back up and have another very specific thing that you're focusing on and trying to get that feedback on. Is the way I've seen be successful.
That's good advice. Well, and I mean, speaking of feedback, I would love to go to some of the audience questions. We'll put a pin in my prepared questions. So Aaron has a good question about that kind of feedback. So even with community as a rapidly maturing industry, there still seem to be a lot of gaps in tech that work well together. For example, Aaron works at Anaplan. They've been essentially hacking the SSO system to manage user data to facilitate gamification and personalization experiences, but they're kind of trying to hack it together because there isn't an out-of-the-box solution. So maybe Hawk, do you have any recommendations in managing around this sort of thing?
Nothing that I want to say on record.
There's no easier way around that. There's no easy way around that.
Especially when the platform's been named.
Yeah. Stop the record button.
I don't think that you should have to manage around a technological problem. I don't think you should. And unfortunately, like, your next prepared question was, what's the evolution of community technology looking like? And what I'm saying that it's looking like is people are no longer having to hack their platforms into these situations that they can't move forward from. And I'm not saying that necessarily that's what's happening with Aaron and Koros, but that's for me the beauty of open source. If you're hacking something, then we can make that. So I'm really sorry. I don't. Outside of talking to another mentor, which is not what you want to hear, I can't really answer that without my bias.
Yeah, I think
feel like that might be an answer, though.
What the evolution is really, if you're talking about specifically around platforms and systems, right? The evolution of these platforms is 10 years ago, it was very hard to integrate data out or push data in. The API limitabilities of all the platforms that are out there were extremely difficult, to where now most of the standard or top players out there in community platform world have very extensible APIs where we're able to pull out and put in pretty much anything that you can think of. You know, you can actually use the API and rebuild the whole entire platform in your own view, right on your website. You don't even need to be in like a Koros. You can API everything over onto another site if you want nowadays.
You still can.
Yeah, you can do that. We don't recommend it, you know, but
no,
the APIs, no, it's not. The level of those customizations, we've recommended people were going more out of the box, sticking to native functionality, and then doing some lightweight or good API integrations with key systems to really keep your platform slim and easy. You know, when you're doing these, yeah, they're cloud systems, but like you still gotta like your add-ons or your plugins, or you're still gotta maintain those and update those throughout the versions. So the least you can have, I think, the better in the long run, unless you really need to customize, then yeah.
Aaron, I don't know how helpful that was, but I did
Sorry,
see
Aaron.
your laughing emojis in the chat, so I think it's all in good fun. But we have another question here. Gina asks, and I think, Fede, this is a great question for you. What are a few ways that you quantify qualitative data, like success stories found through your community? I mean, in Codecademy's case, people who are graduating, people who are getting jobs. How do you do that at Codecademy?
How do we quantify that?
Or
I mean,
celebrate those success stories.
I mean, the first way, the most impactful way that we have is we actually share them with everybody at the teams. So like I was mentioning at the very beginning, connecting the community to the team makes this kind of like very hyped up place where everybody knows that what they're building is something that's touching people's lives. And it's just not just a number. Like you can go to an engineer and tell him, hey, your new course is being viewed by 10,000 people. But that doesn't have the same impact as talking to 2 of them directly, even though the numbers are so staggering differently. So I would say working on having that exposure, like the way that we measure it, more than measure it in numbers, what we do is that we see the reactions of the people. And when we share these stories, we started doing it once a week. And we see that the team is talking about these stories and they are gossiping about this. Hey, you see this guy that did this, or this person that, graduated from this course. So we haven't focused so much on the quantitative in the sense of numberings as much as just measuring more like the question is quantify qualitative data. We're just trying to qualify the data first and making sure that it's useful at all. The other thing that we do with these success stories is sorry?
I said that's what I was going to talk about. Success stories. That's where the value is, right?
Yeah, no, like what we do with the success stories, besides sharing them with everybody in the team, is that we start highlighting them to everybody else. So we have a mailer that goes and we'll highlight some of our learners, the ones that are graduating and the ones that landed jobs using our platform. So we it always comes back to inward and outwards with me. And it's always about exposing our teams to what the community is doing. And then also we send emails and we expose the rest of the community to see that you are together in this with everybody else. So that's my answer, is like we don't really quantify it as much as we just use as much as we can of it.
Yeah, they'll get our success stories, right? And we wouldn't even talk about our product or about our community, and we would just interview them about how are they doing good for the world. It was like a whole series I did for a while, and we talked to that customer, we interview them like, we're doing solar data centers and it's saving green and we're saving this much power, and our success story was just about how they're impacting the world. But they couldn't have gotten there without us, right? And that's like the caveat why we're putting those on there. So we try to focus our customer stories about the end impact, right? Not how we're impacting their company, like, oh, we did so much data faster or whatever it was, but no, we save lives, right, in this medical device system that saves heart attacks, right? And we're saving thousands of lives a year, and tell that story. And it's really about that storytelling, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree, totally agree. And I think like you were saying, it's not that we don't have the numbers. Like we can pull up how many people finished a course last month. It's like, that's easy. It's like you go to Google Looker, boom, you get it in 5 seconds. It's not so much about the numbers. It's just that we're trying to use it in a meaningful way that actually matters for people. So you are a learner, you come to Codecademy. Why should you do a course with us? Why you should do a career path? Well, here's these success stories. There's people talking to the community. You can see that the community is active, that is answering questions, that is supporting each other. And at the end of the day, that is what's driving that impact of that qualitative, so to speak, information and data, is that you have people that come to Codecademy and they see immediately that this is something that is worthwhile their time.
It all comes back to that storytelling. Back to storytelling.
Yeah, the context, right? Because like the reality is, like, your executive or your boss even might not never read the forum or your community, or he might go on there once in a while to look at it, but the reality is your boss or your boss's boss probably never read it. And so when you give them these numbers that say I had 24,000 new members, like, what's the context? Like, really, is that good? Is that bad? Right? It sounds all right, but really, what was the impact of that? And having some of these I used to always, at the back of my deck, used to put contextual, like snippet quotes and like little things. I knew they weren't reading it, and I knew this deck would just get passed up through director to VP to this and up the chain. So it always in the back, like my appendix was just like screen grabs. Like, here's like someone conversation that was really awesome, or here's someone helping someone else out, and they were from like one of our partner companies, right? And highlight that, and I would leave 2 or 3 slides of just like pull quotes, if you would, for them to give them context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that we do get lost a little bit in stats, and everyone knows we get lost a bit in engagement, but like, so 50,000 new people signed up. Is that because those 50,000 people can't figure out how to make your course work? Have you suddenly got all of this new engagement because your product isn't working properly, or because people can't find information on how to make it work? Like, new questions aren't necessarily good. You know, lots of engagement on a support community means something's wrong with the product, right? So
that was actually one of our days.
Well, and you're right though, Hawk, and that kind of brings us back to the point that you made earlier about like, what is the business goal? What is the purpose of the community? And because again, there's no one size fits all metric. You know, one of the questions that I thought about asking was like, what are the most important community metrics in your opinion? But
I want to know that.
Billion. Yeah, we all want to know that.
I want to know that. Can we do a poll for that?
Yeah, really. But we touched a little bit on community tech stack and like, you know, platforms and things in the past. But I would also love to hear, as events and community kind of continue to evolve, maybe Hawk, you could start us off. What are some hot trends that you're kind of keeping an eye on, especially now that the sun is coming out?
Oh, right. I was about to say, look at my light changing.
Beautiful.
That's my aura. Can you see my aura? It's because I'm about to talk about something exciting. The couple of things that I'm really excited about, more because I'm a Kiwi living at the bottom of the world than because I'm a community manager or a community practitioner. But one is the virtual event space. One is the fact that I can be part of this event now. I can be part of all of these events without having to jump on 3 planes and fly for 5 days to get to the other side of the world. And the fact, like last year, people were kind of experimenting with it and we were getting somewhere. You guys know how to do it well, but the rest of us weren't used to being a part of that. And so for me to just get out of bed, roll into the next room, get on here and be talking to all of these people, that's exciting for me. It opens up just so much, you know, so much more space, such a wider audience, and such much more accessible to get that information. And the other part that's exciting for me from a Discourse perspective is remote work. People are getting much more used to remote and distributed work now. And so we're starting to see a change in people building internal community within their organizations, you know, learning to support each other from a community perspective, because you've kind of become this community now. You're not all seeing each other every day. You're not all working together. You're learning to communicate in a way that we're really good at communicating because we're used to communicating with our communities, right? But now our audience and our organizations are kind of starting to hybrid that space. And I really like that, both from a tech perspective, how can we use our technology to support those changing relationships, and from I guess a temperamental or psychological purpose, sorry, I just read it, someone just wrote purpose on the perspective, and that is that, yeah, we are changing the way that we behave and that we think about work and colleagues and people that we interact with. So those two things are exciting for me.
Cool. I heard a quote that it's not the new normal, it's the next normal. And I appreciate that you're right. We're moving into this time where this is just going to become another normal entirely. John, what about you? What are you excited about the future of events and community?
You know, we've been doing virtual events for years, right? So it's not like it's a new thing. I even built like a whole virtual world and a virtual conference at one company, right? We're using like an older On24 virtual platform, right? Where it was post-conference. So it's cool to see that the adoption of it, to me, like people are real, this is viable. We've been working on this for the last 10 years to be able to get like to where we are right now. And to see that it's successful. And I had an event last year, and it was like record numbers for our company, right? We never had that many attendees for anything we've ever done. And I'm just excited to see the hybrid. I am excited to get back into going out and seeing, because I do believe that by meeting people in person, it does strengthen that bond and the relationship. And when you go back and you leave, when you have a question, you think about that person and you have that bond. But there's no way to connect with all these people. My team is like, I might come whole companies in India, right? I'm remote from a different time zone, and we're not hiring in any one location. But the one other technology thing I think that is really changing a lot for bigger companies as well is the advent of using social media monitoring tools for community. So in the past, your social team was dedicated to using Hootsuite, and they just posted at Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and that was it. But what we're realizing is corporations feel that the community is not just their community. Our community is the whole. Right? It doesn't matter if they're on Discord, they're on Stack Overflow, they're on Reddit, they're on Twitter. It doesn't matter where they're at, right? You should be able to respond and engage with your customers where they're at. Go to where they're at. If they have a question, they're in need, especially in the support connotation. If someone's in trouble, and now with the reporting systems, we were able to come up with a system to where you can actually listen, find out, okay, someone asks a question over on Discourse, it routes it back into our CRM, and we know that person, right? Because that person's already on our CM, and they're a customer, and they're a platinum customer. So that means they get an instant response, not like a SLA of 3 hours or 6 or 12 or 24-hour SLA response time. We're now able to respond within an hour on any channel to priority enterprise customers. And we know from our research, the quicker time to response, the higher likelihood to retain that customer, up to 80% higher retention rates for the quicker you are to instant response. It's like, I know back in the day, what was your guys? It was like 2 days or 3 days. You might let a post sit there, and then, years ago. But now that's like unacceptable. Like it's 2-3 hours. People, I think the social media has changed community and how quickly they expect you to respond now. So I'd like to hear what you guys think about response times, and does that influence?
The proverbial bump when you posted a question, nobody answers, and then you kind of like post bump, so it goes up to the top of the thread of the forum. Yeah.
I used to, you said, you remember, I used to have a piece of paper with all the names right in front of me. Like, this person knows this person knows, to their desk, and like every community manager needs to have that list, right, of people.
Well, and it's amazing what you're saying, because we continue to just take for granted all of these innovations that are coming. We're talking right now what excites us about what's going to happen in the next few months, few years, decade. But like maybe in a decade, we'll have forgotten what we were excited about, because it'll all just be old hat, and we'll be like, well, this is just normal now.
Totally.
Fede, I would love to hear from you, last but not least, Fede, what excites you about the future of events and community?
I think there's two that really gets me very excited. Number one is we're seeing a really good improvement in automated moderation tools. I think natural processing languages, language processing, and auto moderation bots and stuff are getting really, really good. Understanding human language and also the context of questions. So as those get better, it's helping us a lot. So I think in the next year and the next few years, we're going to see bots that are going to be able to connect people a lot quicker to each other and answer questions that might be repeats. A lot of people come to, let's say, a chat platform like Discord, and they might ask a question that somebody asked yesterday. Actually, we have our community bot that it's open source on GitHub. Anybody can contribute if you want. Feel free to drop by the repo.
I built one. I built one last year, a community AI manager, part of the search platform. So it's there now.
So that's one of them. Auto moderation, I think, is going to be great. The second trend, though, that I really think is going to be awesome is we see a lot of kind of miniaturization of communities. So we have a large community, but at least in the edtech space, people are moving towards a future where personalization and being in smaller groups matters a lot to them. Being able to have like a mentor to 10, like a ratio 1 to 10, something like Classrooms 1 to 20 seems to be big. So our communities being able to have a big platform where maybe tens of thousands of people are all together, but at the same time having micro communities inside where people can subscribe to specific clubs or specific groups that are about specific topics. That seems to be a trend that is moving forward a lot. Like you see it in a Stack Overflow, how they're launching this new kind of like micro communities within their big community. And you also see it in places like Free Code Camp. I think in their last week in their video, right, they launched Chapters, has an open source project of them. So you can see how there is this understanding now that people are all together, but they also want to feel touched personally in the sense of I belong to a smaller community within the large community. So that seems to be a big trend too.
Huge trend.
That's a really good point, Fede.
Yeah, we've been working on a Google
we
site.
have the social identity cycle that CMX has, like a big framework, and it talks about that identity where, for example, CMX community, we're all community professionals. The sub-identity of that, is I'm a community professional who works for a tech SaaS company. I'm a community professional building a support community. I'm a community professional building a support community in Austin, Texas. Like these are these sub-identities, and I love that you and the other companies are starting to look at more of that like micro community within a community and building these special smaller moments. But that's the time. We're right at time. It's 8:30. It's time for Hawk to have breakfast.
It is.
It's time for the rest of us to have our afternoon snack. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining our panel today. Make sure you check out our networking and our booth break right after this on the half hour. Right at the top of the screen, you'll see networking and booths. In the booths, we have caricature drawing. We've got networking opportunities for you to meet each other. We've got a word from our sponsors. So if you'd like to do that, you can. If you want to just check out the networking tables, that's a really great way to also chat with fellow attendees. Thank you, everybody. Big virtual round of applause. Thanks, Hawk. Thanks, Fede.
No worries. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much.